I sort of want to thank Rebecca for inviting me to give this talk. Especially do want to welcome anyone who is new to the meeting, who has not been here, especially much. Thanks very much. I also have to say something about this remark that my friend Roz made about me being the smartest guy at Dominican. I didn't know flattery was one of the 5 pillars of Islam.
The 6th one.
6th one. Also, I have to say it's simply not true, but even if it were true, it's no compliment. If you don't believe me, just go to Netflix and find a film called The Smartest Guys in the Room. I actually fell a little out of my depth, so I wrote out remarks. That's kind of where I'm going to start. When I was a freshman in high school, I went out for the football team. And since ours is a very small school, everybody practiced together, freshmen to seniors. And I was quite intimidated by the size and especially the meanness of some of these big guys. And it was all quite intimidating. So one of my friends, or it might have been my older brother, tried to give me the kind of encouragement that teenage boys give to each other. Said, "Oh, well, think of it this way. You may be scrawny, but at least you're slow." And that's kind of what I thought of when I considered this topic. You know, I may not be an expert in global business, global economy, but I don't know much about economics either. So I felt that at a bit of a disadvantage. So I was going to have to speak out of what I know something about, speak as a theologian, and perhaps give some insight into doing business in a global economy. In fact, what I hope to do this evening is to show why there is not one Christian perspective on business and economics, but rather multiple perspectives that might lead to multiple conclusions, much like our starting point with Islam. It's a very diverse tradition. Some conclusions I think better than others about these matters. I will conclude, however, with a few thoughts on what this multiplicity of perspectives might mean for dialogue with Islam and other traditions on the one hand, and for education on the other. This might seem like kind of a strange picture, so I'm going to start with, at least a picture of me, so I'm going to start with that. When Rebecca asked for a picture, this was the one I sent her. Okay? So I'm kind of starting with home movies or home pictures, or how I spent my Christmas vacation. I didn't have any recent pictures, so I did send her this one. This is Venice, and the reason I was there was that my wife had spent the previous month in Trento, which is the location of the famous Council of Trent around the time of the Protestant Reformation. So I went to meet her in Italy. It's kind of a long story, but the reason she was there was because in the summer of 2010, the two of us had joined over 500 Catholic theologians from around the world, many from the global south, at a conference in Trento entitled Theological Ethics in the Global South. That's just to prove to the dean that I was there at Christmas time and not missing classes. How is this conference pertinent to our topic? Well, first, this conference, and the way it was conducted, indicates that theologians, many of whom consider and write about economics and business, some of us have been studying Dan Finn for a while, and there are others who take a real interest and are very knowledgeable in this area. Many of them are from the global south, and they see themselves as a global community. Second, the fact that many of these theologians do come from the global south is a reminder that the geographical and in some respects cultural center of at least Catholicism and maybe Christianity has shifted away from Rome, even though for many reasons Italy was still a good gathering point, in part because it was easy to get visas. Third, even with the diversity and with many languages or multiple translations going on, there was a commonality. We all spoke Catholic, so to speak, and a common identity was crucial. Fourth, this strength was also a limitation. That is, the conference was not designed to be either ecumenical among Christians or interfaith, even though there was a clear openness to dialogue of this kind, and many at the conference actually participate in this kind of dialogue quite regularly. But there's another reason why I've started with pictures of Venice. Shakespeare's Merchant of Venice is the starting point for a course I've been teaching entitled Owning and Owing, Theological Perspectives on Property and Debt. So I'd like to spend some time explaining how this famous, or in some respects not so famous, infamous play reveals the complexity of Christian views on business and the economy. The plot is fairly simple. Portia, who lives in Belmont, is a young, bright, and beautiful heiress whose father, who recently died, his will includes a peculiar sort of arranged marriage. Suitors must choose from among 3 caskets or chests, small boxes. 1 gold, 1 silver, 1 lead. Choose the right box containing Portia's picture and you win her hand. Choose wrongly and you promise never to marry at all. Many suitors, coming from far and wide, a global economy if you will, are scared off by this high-risk, high-reward proposition. Bassanio, who loves Portia, would like to travel to Belmont to take the risk, but he has foolishly squandered all his assets and must clear his debts. So he goes to his dear friend Antonio. Antonio is more than willing to help him out, but he is cash-strapped, with all his money tied up with his ships spread out around the globe. When they return, he'll have plenty of money, and he doesn't seem particularly worried that they will return. I suppose a little like those who, exactly 100 years ago today, had little worry that the Titanic would not reach New York on schedule. So he sends his friend Bassanio to his mortal enemy Shylock, a Jewish moneylender, a usurer, whom he despises and has publicly abused and spat upon. Shylock, who hates Antonio because of this abuse, and Antonio's habit of bailing out Shylock's debtors, makes the loan, 3,000 ducats for 3 months, at no interest. But there's a catch. If the loan is not repaid when the bond comes due, Shylock can take a pound of Antonio's flesh from the bodily place of Shylock's choosing. Bassanio gets the loan and the girl when he chooses the right casket. It's lead, so if you're ever in this situation, choose lead. But to Shylock's delight, Antonio's ships do not come in. And so it looks as though Shylock will get his pound of flesh, and the pound he chooses is Antonio's heart. But just in the nick of time, Portia saves the day, and Antonio. Impersonating a lawyer, after pleading with Shylock to be merciful, just as God is merciful, a plea which Shylock rejects, she argues that Shylock can have his pound of flesh, but not a single drop of blood, because that's not in the bond, which Shylock wants to stick to. And thus Antonio is saved. Shylock not only loses his case, but is brought up on charges of plotting the death of a Venetian citizen. Mercifully, or sort of mercifully, however, he is not sentenced to death, but is rather forced to convert to Christianity and to give half his wealth to his estranged daughter and her Christian husband, and so on. How can this play enlighten us about Christian perspectives on doing business in a global economy? What does it tell us about the fact that there are multiple Christian perspectives and positions on this topic? There are many ways, I believe, but let me focus on 3. The question of levels of ethical analysis, attitude towards law and lawyers, and the question of interpretation of sources or sacred text. First, Shakespeare helps us to see that the question of doing business admits of several ethical levels.